Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest from the Technology Advancement Center, or TEC, Chris Hollifield, CEO, Monty Mills, Chief Information Officer, and Yonald Chery, Chief Technology Officer. Thank you all for coming in to discuss this very important topic. It's about cybersecurity, defense, and all of the modern gauntlet of vulnerabilities that we now have to navigate. Chris, team, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to the conversation today.
So we're going to get right into it. We are experiencing on a daily basis these cyber attacks that are hitting our government, our defense infrastructure, but also pretty much every one of us, right? We hear about our credit card information being shared, our Social Security information going out on the dark web. We've had whole countries actually had to shut down their health infrastructure after attacks, and it can become very serious. So, Chris, could you just give us an overview of the purpose of TAC? And how you actually help to ameliorate this really urgent problem that we're all facing.
You know, as I think about where TAC sits, we are, if you look at the history of the organization, we were chartered by the state of Maryland to advance innovation through 4 areas. So education, global technology partnerships, investment, and community engagement. But really what that means kind of in the day-to-day is pretty straightforward. We are passionate about helping the government solve really wicked technology problems faster. And that really is the center of gravity for us. And, as I'm sure this will kind of come out as we're talking through today, everyone here at TAC, based on our experience, we've really spent our careers watching the same pattern repeat itself. You've got a mission owner that has a real problem. Industry may have part of the solution. There's a workforce development part that has to be upskilled. Investors may see opportunity, but all of those pieces, and then, there's clearly more, but all of those pieces just sit in separate stovepipes. So it makes it difficult because everybody's moving out on different timelines, different languages, and so success is pretty difficult. But TAC was created really to help bring all of those disparate pieces together and to do it early and deliberately so that we've got a better chance of really delivering operational capability so that we can take care of some of those problems that you identified in cyber, but then as we look more broadly across technology. So you kind of mentioned it. Our focus really is strongest in security and defense applications, where we see, really technology is moving out at a pace that if you wait too long, the cost of delay is really high. Cybersecurity is a key part of that, but TAC's, and what's within our DNA is to focus more broadly than cyber. So we're interested in any technologies that can help improve mission, help decision making, resilience. Even operational readiness. So, I'm sure it'll come out here in a little bit, but, we've got some fantastic cyber ranges and a lot of deep expertise in zero trust and operational technology. But we do some pretty interesting things as we see the opportunities and threats involved with, where we're at as a nation in AI, critical infrastructure, as I kind of mentioned, before we started the recording. Advanced simulation, virtualization. So any number of things that will give the nation competitive advantage in technology. So our model at TAC is really built around 3 reinforcing lines of effort. We train, we accelerate, we connect. So TAC, really easy to remember there. Through the training line of effort, we want to be part of the solution in helping to develop mission-ready talent through hands-on, operationally relevant education and exercises. So a couple great examples of that. So I'm going to tip it to Yonald. If you can kind of talk through what we have with our OT boot camp?
The OT boot camp really came about, again, partly because we have this workforce development mission with a foot in technology. We realized that a good number of folks really don't understand what's different about OT cyber versus IT cyber. And this is true whether you're an executive and have years of experience in IT, but really no exposure to OT. OT stands for operational technologies, as opposed to information technologies, IT. Right. So IT, you're more concerned with the information infrastructure, desktops, servers, the applications that run those environments, mobile devices, and so on. OT is more concerned with the devices that actually do stuff in the physical world for us, right? So pumps, I would say actuators and sensors in broad categories. So things that the pumps and motors,
electrical transmission stations,
exactly,
right?
Electrical transmission stations. Anything that is actually, essentially moving matter or electrons in some way to help society, right? A lot of that stuff is operational technology. And what's different about that environment versus OT is that a lot of that infrastructure is extremely expensive, right? And IT, if your laptop goes down and you work for a corporate environment, you know what they do? They issue a new laptop and they push your profile to it and restore your backup, and you're good to go. You can't do that with a generator at a dam. You can't do that with transmission lines that are up in hard to reach spaces, right? Or oil wells, right? You don't just bring down a pump and, unload another one off a truck and put it on the field, right? So OT infrastructure is often very expensive and not a lot of backups, and so or redundancy built into the equation. So and the mindset that an OT means that keeping it operational is the primary focus, right? So whereas an IT information safety and safeguarding that data. The sort of typical concerns about confidentiality, integrity, and availability always apply in the IT world. So our boot camp class allows people who have some IT background or an IT understanding of things to bridge into the OT world and understand what's the mindset that people have in OT and why, and what is different about managing cybersecurity issues in an OT environment. So it's a 5-day course. And what's really interesting is, the first couple days you'll do hands-on and literally wiring up circuits and what are called PLCs, programmable logic controllers, which are the components that interface with those actuators and sensors in the real world. And for many folks, they've never even seen a PLC, let alone understood what it was and how those devices are programmed. Everyone today, talks about Python or Java or Rust or some other programming language. Those languages don't apply in the OT world at that level. That's not what they're programmed in, right? They're programmed in something obscure called ladder logic or structured text, right? Which looks like it throws us back to the days of relays in the way that they represent the actual programming.
Well,
so
you're dealing with code that is affecting a physical, a three-dimensional. So that's the thing. We're also accustomed to living in this AI conceptual world. We forget that there's a physical world. That's your point, right? We just forget.
We do forget, and we don't appreciate the differences in the priorities, right? Operationally, the water has to flow, the power has to flow, right? All those things, those things cannot and should not stop, especially if they're part of critical infrastructure. So that introduction to things becomes very interesting. And that does apply beyond critical infrastructure, right? Any business, whether if you're producing widgets of any kind, you have a business objective and a yield quota you might be trying to achieve for that day. And an unplanned operational downtime could sacrifice the ability to meet those objectives. So there's a net business impact when things go down. So again, we introduce people to getting hands-on, which is another aspect of this class that's very different. It's not PowerPoint slides. It's actually hands-on with wiring up circuits and getting a feel for how these things physically interconnect as a precursor to learning some of this, getting some exercises with the programming languages associated in this domain. And then we do essentially over the next couple of days, 3 things. We rotate all the students through a hacking workstation, an operator workstation, and defend workstation. So in the operator workstation, You've now spent 2 days understanding, and you're now running a virtual plant or a physical plant. In the class, we have a couple different scenarios. We run a pizza factory where the students each run a pizza oven and have to understand how to control it and so on, and deal with the changing of the recipes depending on
and
which
then I take the role of the attacker who wants to attack.
Right. Exactly.
And then Monty might be the defender, right?
Correct.
And so you're sitting there making your pizzas. I mean, it's just a image, right? It could be anything. It could be managing a hydroelectric dam.
So Mark, that's exactly right. So, it's foundationally, we've built it on the pizza factory. So, I mean, that's just something that, resonate with people and makes them salivate when it's lunchtime. But, we can also, we can flip the switch so that it's water and wastewater, right? So it's, we can take the plant construct and build it out, whatever makes sense.
The electricity grid for New York City.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. What students learn very quickly, in those last couple of days of the class, is operating OT and defending OT have to work cooperatively, because you don't know if something is offline or down because of a change in the operational priorities of the plant, or if it's the result of unintended or malicious activity. So that tight coupling, that where the cybersecurity personnel in an OT environment have to tightly couple with plant operators to know, is this effect intended or not?
I want to go to Monty because there's something here that really is fascinating to me. You're the chief information officer, right? It's the architecture of how information actually functions within organizations. That's what a CIO does. And there's always this issue between efficiency, which is consolidation, scale, consistency, predictability, and so on, and how easy it is to attack, right? In a sense, you're always thinking, to what extent do I suboptimize my efficiency in order to ensure that my target is hardened if it's vulnerable to outside interference? To the extent that everything is consolidated, how do you think about, when you're with an organization like this, how do you think, because your job as a CIO is kind of, let's drive costs out and right? I mean, and all of our clients have the same thing. How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, well, I want to say, unfortunately, I have an advantage in the sense that I have, decades of military training on how to combat an enemy in hostile territory. And that's unfortunately the nature of where we sit nationally across the space. So coming in as the CIO, that is part of the challenge that I face, is managing risk writ large for the organization based solely on that information conversation. How do I fulfill my role efficiently, like you said, Mark, such that I can protect it against potentially nation-state adversaries who are far more resourced and well-resourced than I am or this organization is. So with that in mind, we take a very deliberate approach on making sure that we are meeting the minimums of compliance across the board, and then ensuring from there, where can we make targeted investments to make it even harder for the adversaries to do what they want to be able to do, while maintaining the operational posture of the organization. So going forward, as we look at how AI is challenging that conversation now and accelerating the problem space, we are looking very deliberately on how does this team leverage AI for what it needs to be able to do, and where can I help facilitate those investments. So to give you a quick example of that, we have the opportunity to make some investments, like many organizations, into ChatGPT or Claude or name your LLM, or even to spin it up locally. Those in and of themselves are risk decisions too, because you don't know what information your team is going to be spinning out back into those cloud environments, which might be then accessible later on down the road to an adversary.
So I have a great example for you. We have clients that have, because they can take advantage of these large language models, that they have actually contributed inadvertently, right? Because anybody within their environment can use those models, inadvertently contributed huge amounts of their data into these models. And that means that now the ownership of that data has now transferred into the LLM, which means that it's available for use by other people who are using that LLM. So now you basically revealed a bunch of things, some of which might be highly confidential, mm-hmm. and that now can be used in unintended ways to attack you as a contributor of that data. So the data itself can be leveraged as a way in to create further harm.
Yeah, that's the challenge of the operational space. Even when Yonald was speaking to the OT side of the conversation, balancing the operational need of the plant versus the security of those operations. Same thing plays out here is when, people or individuals on the team are shooting information into the LLMs. What is the operational value to not only nation states who might be able to leverage that, but think about competitors, right? Business intelligence is its own market space. And can your competitors go into these LLMs and ask you key questions about your operations, potentially leveraging information that your team has already fed into the system? So those are very deliberate conversations that we have with the team. And again, we hold government contracts, so we're very clear as a team, and we have training surrounded that side of the conversation, knowing what we can and cannot put into the LLMs. The team has a very open dialogue, and I want to facilitate that as a CIO, right? That we're all communicating clearly about, hey, this is what we're intending to do. What are the risks surrounding this? Is there a better way to do this? Is there a more efficient way to do this? So that we end up in a position where we always are putting ourselves in an advantage, like Chris says, and by proxy, making sure that our customers that are relying upon us aren't in a disadvantage because they're using us.
I want to go back to a point that you made, and I want to ask you about it, Chris, and Yonald, if you could jump in. Monty made a really interesting point. You almost did it as an aside, Monty, and I just picked up on it. What you were saying is that our tendency is to look at our own situation in terms of defense in geographic, physical terms, but those terms are no longer correct. But what you were saying, Monty, is that because of the openness of the internet and the interconnectedness of where we are, and AIs being able to go out into the wild and basically function without guidance, they get their orders once and they continue to do whatever they do. And criminal ransomware organizations setting these attack units up, right, and giving them independent orders. In a sense, we are never at home. We are never safe, right? We are always on the battlefield in certain respects, in certain areas. And we just have to really think. When we're online, like right now, we're actually within the field of play for that struggle today, right? So we have to when we're on our cell phones, when we're driving our cars, we have to actually change our mindset. Was that the point that you were conveying, Monty? Because you've lived that life. Do we now all have to think a little bit more like you with your 20, 30 years of experience?
Yeah, so out of our military experience, OPSEC is one of the key terms and concepts that we live by. Operational security, right? It comes straight out of the Vietnam War, where we learned that our adversaries took advantage of how open we were with what would be considered unclassified information, and were able to use that operationally against us for harm. And so that has translated into decades of training and leadership perspective on what it is that we are doing and how we're going to protect that information until such time that it doesn't generate significant risk for us.
And you see state actors and non-state actors basically correlate between information on people who have served and travel. Ticket buying on airlines, right?
I want to push into that really quick, Mark, and because there's a key point that drives out of that conversation is Back in the day, probably 5 years ago, if we can think of that as a long time ago in cyberspace, right? Intelligence operations would be doing those kind of things. So my name was part of the names that were pulled in the OPM hack back in the day, with all of my family's information and all my security stuff that was pulled back allegedly to China, right? And those operations typically would take months to execute, operating at human speed. And now what we see is, especially with the recent hack, if you want to call it, by OpenAI on Hugging Face, they're leveraging AI capabilities with a purpose and intent. And instead of relying upon human operators spread geographically to pull that information together, you're right, Mark, it's going to be happening instantaneously, and it's going to be persistent at a level of persistence that we haven't seen going into the future. So our ability to think deliberately about the information that we consider sensitive to our operations or our persons or our customers has to be at that's just me speaking as a CIO, right? Has to be at the forefront of the conversation every single time, because once you've lost the security posture for it in today's age, it's gone, right? So we've got to be thinking deliberately, and not only in terms of how we used to approach risk decisions in the timing and the space that it used to be, but we have to be thinking it deliberately in the space where everything is happening at digital speed now.
So you at TAC, Chris, are both fostering this awareness. So that was what that's what you were talking about. You're putting people who are in leadership positions through an exercise where you're fostering awareness of these various elements that are interconnected, not just the tech and the software elements, but also the physical elements. And then you're also forging partnerships to create responses. Could you talk a little bit about those partnerships and how you try to bring people together across these different lines: academic, business, investor, innovator lines?
Yeah. So, as I kind of started talking through, 3 lines of effort that we do here. One is, and we've kind of walked this through on our training line of effort. Good conversation around our OT boot camp. There's also a, if you look at the population that we're trying to help train there on the OT side, that's, really upskilling your technical workforce, but also we're very, very serious about our internship program, which we could talk a little bit about later. But we look at, if we really truly want to be part of that solution in training the workforce, it's starting early. It's being a shepherd for the young kids that have an interest, have the aptitude, can be inspired, and try to shepherd them into those work roles. So we see it as, it's a full pipeline that we want to help move folks along that are motivated. So that's kind of our train effort. We also, are, very focused on accelerating for our government partners, and we'll talk that in a minute. But I want to get at your question, which is really it's our 3rd line of effort, and that's our connect line of effort. So, and I kind of mentioned in the beginning, we really passionately, we want to be part of the solution in, fast tracking capabilities, helping to rapidly drive capabilities that address government, wicked problems. And what we see our place in that is, convening government, industry, academia, nonprofits, the investment group, economic development partners. So it's a whole constellation that will lead to this whole of society effort to address these wicked problems. And we've just seen it, too many times that, there's no single organization that can solve. You've got to bring everybody together. So a couple examples in that space, we have a partnership program here, and it's primarily focused on the industry side, and it's built around practical pain points that the companies face when they're trying to engage the government or one of the other kind of sections of the ecosystem. So let me just kind of break that down in simple terms. So there's some industry partners, they may be 100% remote and they need office space. They're virtually distributed across the country and they need to have a place where they can come in for conference room, meet with other partners. So that's one set of pain points.
There can be a cultural disconnect, right? I mean, you've got a whole bunch of different procedures and processes and clearances and all these other things. Are you helping people with that?
Yeah, different languages, different lexicon. Yeah, I mean, all of that kind of in that particular use case that we want to be a part of. There's another set of pain points that's around having the environments to test and evaluate capability. So we've got some fantastic environments here to be able to do that, to kick the tires on a capability so that a company could mature it. They could demo it to another partner. And so we want to be able to provide that environment space so that they can move themselves forward. Or just, hosting, even a technical exchange meeting. So we've got multiple pain points for industry partners that we want to be able to address. I think a really good example, Yonald, if you can kind of talk briefly on the Defend the Airport series and kind of where that's going, because I think this illustrates kind of where we want to be in this space and where we're trying to not just talk about a problem, but really drive effectiveness in it. So, Yonald, if you don't mind.
So Defend the Airport is an event that we put on starting last year that was built around a cyber range that we had built modeled after Honolulu Airport. And so we have a large 15 by 20 foot model of the airport representing roughly atypical systems that you'd see at an airport: radar control, aircraft lighting, landing light systems, perimeter security, fuel management, baggage claim, parking facility and lighting kind of things. And so what we did is we built that environment up and we showed how easy it was to hack some of the systems that were in that environment. And what we learned is by engaging different airport operators and so on since then, is that a lot of airport operators, frankly, weren't aware of how vulnerable some of these systems are that they depend on for their daily operations, right? And so what we've done from last year, where we first introduced that cyber range, this past year, a month or so ago, at the Defend the Airport 2.0, is we started to integrate those problems that we saw that were coming back from airport operators and their contractors that existed in the airport environment and bringing together commercial solution providers to some of those pain points. And we were able to highlight a couple of those companies and say, okay, well, if you are concerned about this problem and you want to manage this risk, here are some approaches that people are using, and here are some capabilities that we've discovered that make sense. But what's really interesting about the TAC is, in most organizations, when you have a problem, you tend to go out and you treat it as an acquisition problem. I'm going to go buy that solution for that one point thing or that thing. And cyber is a very broad category of things of the sort, particularly for OT. We here at the TAC get a number of different inputs from folks from the mission side and the consumer side, and put together a more holistic picture about, well, what really are the risks and challenges that you need to be managed. And so we're able to recommend, frankly, a slate of different approaches to solving those problems and a number of commercial solutions that they ought to consider together. Right. And so you're solving an integrated problem rather than perhaps spending too much buying a lot of tools and widgets that in a single purpose manner might address those solutions as well.
I love what you're saying. What you're saying is, when you're evaluating a solution, convenience and speed might come at the cost of security and the ability to robustly defend. And nowhere is that going to be more obvious than at an airport, right? Because if we make our airports vulnerable and we have actors who are trying to attack those airports, which we do, then your short-term benefit can be at the expense of making you comparatively more vulnerable. And who gets attacked first? It's the most vulnerable of the airports. So if you're in that game, you have to, it's just like leaving, your car unlocked. or having a car alarm system, which one is going to get attacked, right? We're going to go around the room one last time. Fabulous discussion. We could go on forever. Yonald, what is the point that you want us to take away from this discussion?
I always try to boil down what seems like a very technical and foreboding topic for many people in sort of non-jargon language that the average person could understand. So, if I were to break down cyber, it really comes down to 4 questions, right? What do I have? What state is it in? And what's it doing? Do I care? And what action do I take? Right. And the first thing that people often don't understand is really assessing, what are those assets that they have that are critical to the functioning of the business. Right. So for most of your viewers, I would suspect a lot of it has to do with information, right? You want to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data that the organization has, right? You want to prevent that from being lost or stolen in some way, and then you want it to be available when you need it. So it would be great if we had another opportunity to go into strategies for doing those 4 steps. But I do think I want to leave folks in a positive note that if you take some of those steps, right, which namely fulfill the goal of maintaining resilience for your organization, because things are going to happen, right? Monty's job is infinitely harder than mine as a hacker, right? He has to defend against all the threats. I just have to find one way in, right? And so if that happens, the question is, how fast can Monty restore operational capability from an IT perspective? So resilience is actually key, right? The ability to sort of restart and re-engage is key. And I think the tools for that are accessible and affordable for everyone to be able to use.
Monty, what is the point that we need to take away?
Well, as the chief communication officer, right, chief information officer, thinking about data and information, I want to leave one point here, Mark, is, the challenge that we face right now, whether we're talking about cybersecurity, AI, or workforce development, or even national security, all of that is very real. But there's also, coupled to that, a lot of opportunity. Here at the TAC, we see extraordinary talent every day. We see amazing capabilities coming through the door from small business. We're seeing a drive in passion in government agents that we engage with who are trying to protect our nation. And that is where, coming back to that CIO conversation, it starts with communication. Our job, our function here at the TAC is to be able to open those doors and open those conversations. And so someone listening to this today, I would want them to walk away with, it starts with the opportunity to communicate, right? Being able to find partners, be able to find people that you can learn from and be able to leverage to support you in those decisions. Even I, as a CIO, every single day, the challenges that I face or the challenges anybody on this team faces, we acknowledge we're not the experts on everything, but we know where to go find the information and build the teams to solve those problems.
Thank you, Monty. And Chris, what thoughts should we leave this conversation with?
There are malicious cyber actors that are trying to get your data. They're trying to extort money from you. There's some significant challenges out there. That's just on the cyber side. There's advantage that's fleeting broadly across technology that we need to, as a society, figure out how to take advantage of. But at the end of the day, I'm optimistic because as I look at it, and it's kind of what we've talked through the discussion here, I'm optimistic because we're not starting at zero. The capability is there. The talent is there. The mission demand clearly is real, both across the federal government and the state side. The challenge is making those stovepipes communicate, as Monty just kind of talked through. And on top of that, make it move faster. And it's been my experience, and I think just about everybody here would probably echo, that starts with trust. And that's where I think TAC can help reduce that friction, and allies of TAC to be part of the conversation in bringing those stovepipes together to establish real trust. And once we do that, now we're out ahead. We're taking advantage of those fleeting opportunities. And we want to be part of that solution.
The thing that strikes me from this conversation is that we all have a personal choice to make, and these personal choices that we each are doing on a small level for ourselves, they really impact civil society. Everybody who is involved in this space, their thinking, their tools, their knowledge, their time can be used for good or for evil purposes. If there are a lot of people trying to actually create mischief for civil society, steal information, and undertake a nefarious task, right? If there are organizations that are doing it, there are people actually doing it. There are people whose job it is to fool, to steal, to misappropriate, to attack, right? We have to think about that. Are we involved in that? Are we helping that? And are we also thinking in a way that helps to prevent it? And so we all have to really think. We have to sit with ourselves and think about what we buy, what we use, how we use it, what information we're contributing. Are we helping somebody else do something that steal information from somebody? Are we doing that? We need to really, really, really consider. I want to thank you all for sharing the work of the Technology Advancement Center, or TAC, Chris Hollifield, CEO, Monty Mills, Chief Information Officer, and Yonald Chery, Chief Technology Officer. Please thank all your people, all the people who fund your organization, all of your clients. This is really important work. It affects us all. Really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.